My name is Marina Smith. I am 33 years old, and on Thanksgiving afternoon, my mother slapped me across the face because I asked a simple question. We were sitting around the long dining table at my parents' rented house in Scottsdale, Arizona. I had paid for the catered turkey, the side dishes, and the wine. My 28-year-old sister Ashley sat at the opposite end of the table, fixing her hair in the reflection of her phone screen. Halfway through the meal, my mother Brenda stood up and tapped her crystal glass with a spoon. She smiled down at Ashley and announced that she had a few special surprises for the daughter who brought so much light to the family. First, she handed Ashley a heavy velvet box. Ashley opened it and gasped. Inside was a diamond ring. Then came a large shopping bag from a designer boutique. Ashley pulled out a leather handbag that I knew cost $6,000. But the final gift was the reason my mother wanted everyone watching. She reached into her pocket and tossed a set of silver keys onto the table. They landed next to Ashley's plate. My mother announced she had just put the down payment on a brand new luxury sedan for Ashley. My aunts and uncles clapped. My father, Richard, raised his glass. I sat there with an empty plate and an empty lap. I looked at the keys, then at the designer bag, and finally up at my mother. "What about me?" I asked. The clapping stopped. The room went silent. My mother marched around the table. Her heels clicked sharply against the hardwood floor. She stopped right beside my chair. "You are 33 years old," she said. "Stop being a jealous embarrassment." I reminded her that I had paid for the very food she was digesting. I reminded her that I had guaranteed the corporate credit line she claimed she needed to save my father's logistics business. The slap came fast. Her hand struck my cheek so hard my vision blurred for a second. My father stared down at his half-eaten turkey. Ashley picked up her phone and started recording the aftermath for her followers. Nobody defended me. I did not cry. I did not yell. I stood up, reached into my purse, and pulled out my phone. I opened the banking application, navigated to a specific fraud alert I had drafted hours earlier, and pressed a single button. Before I tell you what happened when I pressed that button, tell me your age and where you are watching from today. I want to know how far this story travels here on Grape Vengeance. Nobody at the table noticed what I had done at first. They were too busy whispering about my behavior. Then my father's phone began buzzing against the wood table. A second later, Ashley received a loud notification. Then my mother's phone rang. Within 2 minutes, the celebration turned into chaos. Ashley was hyperventilating because the dealership financing company just flagged her auto loan as invalid. My father was staring at a notification from his bank stating that his primary emergency credit line was frozen, pending a fraud investigation. My mother looked at her phone, then looked at me. The color drained from her face. "Undo this right now," she ordered. I picked up my coat. "I just did," I said. I walked out the front door, leaving them trapped in a reality they could no longer afford. To understand how we reached that moment, you have to look back 3 months. I work as a senior risk analyst in Phoenix. My entire career is built on finding numbers that do not match the story people tell. The physical sting on my cheek mirrored the sharp silence swallowing the dining room. Nobody moved. The relatives who had been cheering and raising their wine glasses seconds earlier now stared down at their plates. The silence hung heavy in the air until a sharp, sustained vibration broke it. My father looked down. His phone sat right next to his water glass, the screen glowing bright with a high-priority alert. Richard always kept his notifications turned up, constantly reminding everyone that his logistics business required his undivided attention. I watched his eyes scan the glowing text. The smug satisfaction of the proud patriarch melted into genuine panic. His shoulders dropped. The alert was directly from his primary commercial bank. It informed him that the emergency corporate credit line, the exact account I had personally guaranteed to keep his company afloat, was now frozen under a formal fraud investigation lock. Before my father could even process the words on his screen, a different chime echoed from the opposite end of the long table. Ashley picked up her phone. She had been busy checking her reflection. but this notification was an urgent email. I knew exactly who sent it. It was the financing and compliance department of the luxury auto dealership. When I triggered the mass notification, the script I built automatically fired an email to the dealership, alerting them that the down payment for the sedan had been processed using a disputed and unauthorized corporate card. Ashley read the subject line. Her jaw dropped open. The shiny silver keys she had been clutching slipped from her fingers and clattered against the fine china plate. Then came the third ring. It was a standard incoming call, loud and persistent, coming from my mother's purse hanging on the back of her chair. Brenda snatched her phone. She glared at the screen, and I saw her posture stiffen. The caller ID displayed the name of the independent corporate auditor who oversaw the local charity fund she managed. I had included him in the mass alert because the corporate credit line I co-signed was deeply entangled with her charity operating accounts. She rejected the call, but it immediately began ringing again. The automated system was relentless. Brenda shoved her phone back into her purse and marched toward me again, her face twisted into a mask of pure rage. She pointed a manicured finger at my chest and commanded me to undo whatever I had just done. She raised her voice, performing for the captive audience of aunts and uncles, claiming I was ruining a sacred family gathering over a petty, childish tantrum. She told them I was throwing a fit just because I did not get a present to unbox. I did not step back. I looked right into the eyes of the woman who had just struck me. I spoke clearly, ensuring every relative in the room heard my voice over the ringing phones. I explained that freezing the account was not a tantrum, it was a legal obligation. I told her the text message I sent was a mass notification sent directly to the bank fraud division, the corporate auditor, and the dealership holding the title to the sedan. I pointed at the leather designer handbag sitting on the chair. I pointed at the diamond ring sparkling on my sister's finger. I stated that luxury vehicles and $6,000 accessories were not business emergencies. For years, I played the silent financial spine of this family. When Richard claimed his logistics company was failing, he begged me to co-sign that high-limit credit account. He looked me in the eye and swore the money would only be used to keep his loyal employees on the payroll. I agreed, because I wanted to be a good daughter. My career as a senior risk analyst trained me to protect corporate assets. Yet I ignored the glaring risks within my own bloodline. But numbers do not care about family loyalty. When I reviewed the hidden ledger hours before dinner, the math revealed the ugly truth. There was no payroll crisis. They used my clean credit and my signature to fund their fake wealthy lifestyle. Ashley finally understood the severity of the email she was reading. She stood up, knocking her heavy wooden chair backward. She began hyperventilating, gripping the edge of the table. She looked at our mother, demanding to know if the car was actually paid for. Brenda tried to hush her, whispering that they would sort it out tomorrow morning. But Ashley realized her new status symbol was tied to a frozen, disputed account. The dealership was already threatening to flag the vehicle as stolen if the fraudulent down payment was not replaced with clean funds within 24 hours. She started sobbing, begging me to call the bank and authorize the charge. She said her entire image depended on that car. That was when my father finally found his voice. Richard stood up, smoothing the wrinkles in his expensive sweater. He did not ask if my cheek was hurt. He did not apologize for his wife striking me in front of our guests. Instead, he adopted his usual calm negotiating tone. He asked me to sit back down. He begged me to keep these financial matters private, suggesting we could handle the paperwork quietly after the guests went home. He wanted to maintain the illusion of the perfect, generous patriarch in front of his siblings. I stared at him, feeling nothing but cold clarity. I told him privacy was a privilege, reserved for people who did not steal my identity to buy jewelry. The Whisper Network ignited immediately. Aunt Diane leaned over to Uncle Robert, murmuring about the credit card. The cousins exchanged wide-eyed glances across the table. The grand performance my parents had orchestrated was collapsing in real time. My mother tried to speak to spin another lie to claim I was confused or stressed from my demanding corporate job in Phoenix, but the words failed her. The evidence was ringing in their pockets. I picked up my coat from the hallway hook. I walked out the front door, leaving their fake reality to crumble behind me. The heavy wooden door clicked shut, cutting off the sound of Ashley crying and Brenda shouting my name. The cool November evening air hit my face, soothing the burning sensation on my skin. I walked down the paved driveway of their rented Scottsdale house. The neighborhood was quiet, lined with manicured lawns and expensive parked cars. My parents pretended they owned this estate, just like they pretended they bought those gifts with their own hard-earned money. Every step away from that house felt like shedding a heavy, suffocating chain. My hands were shaking not from fear, but from the sudden rush of adrenaline. For 33 years, I had craved their validation. I paid their property taxes, covered their unexpected bills, and swallowed their subtle insults, hoping one day they would look at me the way they looked at Ashley. Tonight, the slap cured me of that illusion. I reached my car, unlocked the door, and slid into the driver's seat. I gripped the steering wheel, taking a deep breath of the quiet isolation. I expected the night to end there. I expected to drive back to my apartment in Phoenix, hire a lawyer in the morning, and begin the clinical process of untangling my name from their debts. I started the engine and shifted into gear. Just as I pulled out of the neighborhood, my phone screen illuminated the dark cabin. It was not a call from my mother or my father. It was a text message from a coworker who was supposed to be eating dinner with her own family. Then another message arrived from a friend I had not spoken to in months. Then 5 more notifications fired in rapid succession. My heart rate spiked again. I pulled over to the side of the road and opened the first message. The text read, "Marina, are you okay? You need to check Ashley's page right now." The trap I set had sprung flawlessly, but I had underestimated my sister's obsession with an audience. The private confrontation was no longer private. The next phase of the nightmare was already loading on my screen. I stared at the glowing screen in my dark car. The urgent message from my coworker demanded my attention. My thumb hovered over the notification. Before I reveal the digital nightmare waiting on that screen, you need to comprehend the elaborate snare my parents constructed. To understand the true weight of that Thanksgiving dinner, we must rewind 3 months to a sweltering Friday afternoon in late August. My mother managed a mid-sized local charity fund in Arizona. Brenda thrived on the prestige. She loved the charity galas, the staged photo opportunities, and the local influence her position provided. My father ran a logistics and freight company. Richard always projected the image of a successful, self-made entrepreneur wearing tailored suits and driving leased luxury SUVs. However, my position as a senior risk analyst taught me that the loudest wealth is often the most fragile. They arrived at my apartment unannounced that August afternoon. Richard looked disheveled. His tie was loose and he kept wiping sweat from his forehead. Brenda clutched her expensive purse, her face drawn tight with practiced anxiety. They sat on my couch and delivered a rehearsed sob story. Richard claimed his freight business was facing an unexpected cash flow crisis due to delayed vendor payments. He looked at the floor and said his loyal truck drivers were about to miss their paychecks. He painted a grim picture of hardworking men losing their homes because he could not make payroll. Then Brenda leaned forward, deploying her weapon of choice. She used guilt. She reminded me of my spotless credit history, my high salary, and my secure lifestyle. She insisted that family helps family in times of crisis. They did not ask for a small loan. They presented documents for a high-limit commercial credit facility. They needed a guarantor with perfect financial standing to secure the account. Richard promised the funds would serve strictly as a temporary bridge loan to cover payroll for 2 months. He swore the balance would be cleared the moment his outstanding invoices cleared. I hesitated. My gut warned me to decline, but 33 years of conditioning is difficult to break. I wanted to protect those imaginary truck drivers. I wanted to earn my parents' respect. I signed the guarantor agreement. I laid down one strict condition. The funds were for business payroll operations only. Richard shook my hand. Brenda kissed my cheek. Numbers do not hold allegiance. Spreadsheets lack the capacity for deception. People lie, but data always tells the truth. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, I received a standard automated alert from my financial monitoring service. My credit score had dipped by 12 points. A minor fluctuation is often normal, but my professional instincts flared. A sudden drop usually indicates high credit utilization. I opened my laptop and bypassed the standard banking app, logging directly into the commercial portal using my guarantor credentials. I downloaded the hidden ledger for my father's emergency bridge loan. The document populated on my screen. I scanned the first column of merchant codes. My chest tightened. The cold wash of reality hit me instantly. There were 0 payroll disbursements. There were no transfers to employee accounts. There were no payments to fuel vendors or maintenance garages. Instead, the ledger read like a luxury vacation itinerary. I saw thousands of dollars spent at high-end restaurants in Scottsdale. I found recurring charges at exclusive day spas. I located receipts for premium domestic flights to coastal resorts. My father had not secured the account to save his company. He secured it to maintain the illusion of his wealth while his actual business slowly bled out. The betrayal deepened as I scrolled further down the page. The casual spending was insulting, but the large wire transfers were criminal. I noticed a recurring payment pattern. Every Friday, a uniform sum of $4,000 moved from the commercial credit line into an external account. The recipient name read A-List Consulting, LLC. The memo line claimed these were fees for digital marketing and brand strategy. I opened a new browser tab. I accessed the Arizona Corporation Commission public database. I typed the name of the consulting firm into the search bar. The state registry loaded the official formation documents. I scrolled down to the listed registered agent and primary owner. The name printed on the legal document was Ashley Smith. My 28-year-old sister did not run a consulting firm. She did not know the first thing about corporate brand strategy. Ashley took selfies by resort pools and complained about waking up before 10 in the morning. Brenda and Richard had fabricated a fake vendor. They were actively siphoning the credit line I guaranteed, laundering the borrowed money through a dummy corporation to finance the golden child. I cross-referenced the dates of the transfers with Ashley's social media posts. The day after the first $4,000 wire hit her fake business account, she posted a picture of a lavish weekend trip to Las Vegas. The funds I authorized to save truck drivers were paying for her bottle service. My investigation did not stop there. I pulled the specific transaction metadata from the previous 48 hours. 2 fresh charges glared at me from the screen. The first was a $6,000 point-of-sale swipe at a designer boutique in Phoenix. The merchant code matched the exact store known for exclusive leather goods. The second charge was a heavy direct transfer to a high-end auto dealership, flagged as a vehicle down payment. I sat alone in my home office, staring at the raw data. They did not just favor Ashley over me. They used my signature, my clean background, and my financial stability to purchase her love. They transformed my responsible career into a funding source for their fraud. I spent the next 2 weeks quietly preparing. I gathered every invoice. I downloaded every digital signature. I compiled the evidence into an encrypted audit package. I set up the automated alerts to trigger the moment I gave the command. I attended that Thanksgiving dinner, knowing exactly what sat inside those gift boxes. I knew the leather bag and the silver keys were bought with stolen money tied directly to my name. When I asked my mother that simple question at the dinner table, she did not slap me out of mere annoyance. She slapped me out of fear. Brenda saw the cold recognition in my eyes. She realized her control over the quiet, dependable daughter had vanished. The physical strike was her final, desperate attempt to force me back into submission. It was a failed effort to preserve the financial trap she built. I took a slow breath of the cool air inside my car. I let go of the steering wheel and picked up my phone again. The trap was exposed and my retaliation was executed. The secret was supposed to be my private weapon to force them into legal surrender. I flipped the device over to read the frantic message from my coworker. I tapped the link she sent. I did not realize my sister had left her camera running. I did not realize Ashley had just broadcast my mother's violence and their financial ruin to thousands of watching strangers. I sat in the cold driver's seat and tapped the glowing blue link my coworker had sent. The browser loaded a screen recording of a social media live broadcast. Ashley had propped her device against a tall floral centerpiece on the dining table. The lens was perfectly angled to capture her good side while she unboxed her expensive gifts. She wanted her online audience to witness her unearned wealth. Instead, she broadcast her own destruction. The video started right as my mother tossed the silver keys onto the tablecloth. I watched myself sitting, frozen, in the background. The audio quality was surprisingly sharp. My voice echoed through the tiny phone speakers when I asked about my own present. Then I watched my mother cross the frame. I saw the anger contort her features. The microphone picked up the distinct crack of her hand striking my face. A barrage of text scrolled up the side of the footage. The comment section was exploding in real time. Ashley had always desperately wanted to be a famous lifestyle influencer. She spent hours curating a fake reality of resort vacations and high-end shopping sprees in Scottsdale. She bought thousands of fake followers, but her actual audience consisted mostly of local girls who went to high school with her. Those local viewers were wide awake on Thanksgiving night. I read the comments flying across the display. People typed out strings of question marks. Users asked if the physical assault was a staged prank. Then the recording reached the exact moment I fought back. The viewers heard my voice cut through the dining room tension. They heard me clearly state that the designer bag and the luxury vehicle were purchased with stolen funds. They heard me announce that I had just frozen the corporate credit line due to fraud. The digital reaction shifted instantly. The shock turned into a digital witch hunt. The local audience recognized my mother. Brenda loved having her face plastered on local charity event flyers. She loved giving interviews to small Phoenix lifestyle magazines. Her ego made her recognizable. Within minutes, the viewers connected the dots between my accusations and the charity fund she managed. Users began tagging the official social media page of the charity board. Others tagged the local Phoenix news stations. The clip was clipped again, shared to different platforms, and multiplied faster than anyone could contain it. My phone vibrated in my palm, pulling me away from the video. An incoming call took over the screen. The caller ID flashed my sister's name. I swiped to answer and held the speaker to my ear. I expected to hear crying. I expected a shred of remorse or maybe a frantic question about how to return the car. I received neither. The screaming started before I even said hello. Ashley shrieked into the microphone, her voice high and breathless. She did not ask if my cheek was bruised. She did not ask if I was driving safely. She launched into a hysterical rant about her notifications. She told me her phone was crashing from the volume of incoming hate messages. She explained that a high-end salon in downtown Phoenix had just sent her an email canceling her free hair extension sponsorship. 2 local boutique owners' women, who previously gave Ashley free clothing in exchange for online posts, had immediately terminated their brand deals. They saw the video and wanted nothing to do with a girl holding stolen merchandise. Ashley blamed the entire disaster on me. She yelled that I ruined her online career. She accused me of waiting for the camera to roll just to humiliate her on purpose. She demanded that I fix the situation before she lost her remaining sponsors. Her entitlement was so profound it bordered on delusion. She laid out her plan for my redemption. She ordered me to drive back to the house, stand in front of her camera, and record a public apology video. She wanted me to lie to her audience. She instructed me to say I had drank too much wine at dinner. She wanted me to claim that the fraud accusations were just a jealous lie I invented because I was bitter about being single. I listened to her hyperventilate for 2 full minutes. I let her exhaust her lungs. When she finally paused to take a breath, I spoke in a quiet, even tone. I reminded her that I did not set up the tripod. I did not hit the broadcast button. I did not steal charity money to finance a luxury sedan. I told her the truth was already circulating on the internet, and no fake apology video could erase the bank records I had already submitted to the fraud department. She started screaming again, threatening to sue me for defamation. I lowered the phone from my ear. I pressed the red button to end the call. I opened her contact file and hit the block option. I did the same for my mother and my father. I sealed off my digital borders. The silence in my car returned, replacing the hysterical noise of my sister. I looked back at the social media application. Ashley was desperately trying to delete the original stream, but the internet never forgets. Anonymous accounts had already mirrored the footage. Drama channels were dissecting the body language of my mother. A local watchdog group that monitors nonprofit spending in Arizona posted a screenshot of the video, demanding an immediate investigation into the Heritage Charity Fund. The secret was fully exposed. The public humiliation Brenda tried to force onto me had ricocheted backward with devastating precision. My mother wanted to shame me into submission in front of our extended relatives. Instead, she broadcast her own crime to the entire city. I put my vehicle in drive and pulled onto the empty highway heading back to Phoenix. The streetlights flickered overhead. I felt a strange sense of peace settling into my chest. For the first time in my adult life, I was not rushing to fix their mistakes. I was allowing the fire they started to burn their own house down. When I arrived at my apartment complex, I walked into the lobby and checked my physical mail. I unlocked my front door and dropped my keys onto the counter. I poured myself a glass of cold water. I turned my phone back on to check my work email. A single notification slipped through my blocked caller list. It was a visual voicemail left directly on my carrier server. The transcript generated on my screen. The message was from Richard. His usual arrogant tone was gone, replaced by a trembling, desperate whisper. The digital fire was burning fast, but the real-world consequences were moving even faster. The stolen money was gone, the credit line was frozen tight, and the first of the month was approaching. The fake wealth they paraded around Scottsdale was hitting a brick wall. My father needed cash immediately, and he was about to reveal a secret far darker than a stolen handbag. The sun rose over Phoenix, casting a harsh orange glow across my kitchen counter. I sat on a bar stool holding a warm mug of black coffee. The apartment was perfectly quiet. I did not have to rush to a store to buy replacement gifts. I did not have to draft emergency budgets for my parents. For the first time in a decade, my Friday morning belonged entirely to me. I unlocked my phone screen and opened the voicemail application. The visual transcript of the message Richard left late last night spanned 3 full paragraphs. I pressed play to hear his actual voice. The man speaking through the tiny speaker sounded nothing like the confident logistics executive who commanded Thanksgiving dinner. His tone trembled. He took shallow, uneven breaths. He sounded terrified. Richard admitted everything I already suspected. He confessed that the sprawling Scottsdale estate was a financial illusion. For 5 years, my father stood in the center of that marble foyer during holiday parties, swirling a glass of expensive scotch, loudly bragging to my uncles that he paid cash for the property. He claimed true wealth meant zero debt. The reality was a mountain of liabilities. He owned a fraction of the equity. The residents carried 2 distinct mortgages with high interest rates. His shipping company stopped turning a profit 3 years ago. To maintain the facade of success, he drained his retirement accounts. When those ran dry, he allowed my mother to raid her charity operating funds to cover the housing payments. When the board of directors started asking questions about missing capital, they panicked. They needed a clean source of cash to cover their tracks. That was why they manipulated me into guaranteeing the commercial credit facility. My signature was the only thing keeping a roof over their heads. Now that account was locked. The automated system flagged the vehicle purchase and the boutique charges. The bank froze every outgoing transfer. Richard begged me through the phone. He pleaded for me to lift the restriction for just 1 week. He promised he would sell his remaining business assets and repay every cent. He said a missed mortgage payment would trigger a default clause, and the lender would begin foreclosure proceedings by Monday morning. I finished my coffee, placed the empty mug in the sink, and unblocked his number. I dialed his contact. He answered on the first ring. "Marina," he gasped, sounding out of breath. "Tell me you called the fraud division. Tell me you fixed this." I kept my voice flat and even. I told him I did not call anyone to fix his mistake. I informed him the freeze would remain active until the investigators finished their work. He raised his voice, adopting the authoritative tone he used when I was a child. He commanded me to listen to reason. He stated that I was destroying his life over a simple misunderstanding. He claimed family must stick together during hard times. I stopped him mid-sentence. I asked him where his loyalty was when Brenda struck my face. He fell silent. The only sound on the line was his heavy breathing. I laid out the truth he refused to acknowledge. I told him my generosity was not a shield for his cowardice. He watched his wife physically assault his own daughter, and he did not say a single word. He stared at his dinner plate because he knew defending me meant angering the woman who helped him steal money. He traded my safety for a mortgage payment. I told him he was a weak man hiding behind stolen funds, and I would never sign another document for him as long as I lived. I ended the call and permanently blocked his number again. I did not feel any guilt. A boundary requires action, and I was finally enforcing mine. The morning turned into afternoon, and the consequences multiplied rapidly. The local news cycle caught wind of the viral footage. Ashley failed to scrub the video from the internet. Her audience downloaded the clip and shared it across dozens of community pages. The digital footprint reached the screens of the exact people Brenda feared most. Around 2 o'clock, the board of directors for the Heritage Charity Fund called an emergency session. Brenda had spent over a decade curating her position as the executive director. She treated the organization like her personal social club, using donor contributions to host lavish parties where she could rub shoulders with local politicians. She derived all her self-worth from that title. One of the younger board members saw the video circulating online and immediately forwarded it to the board president. The footage showed the charity director proudly distributing luxury goods while her own daughter announced the items were purchased with stolen money. The board did not hesitate. They contacted the independent financial auditor. They demanded an immediate, exhaustive review of every ledger Brenda touched over the past 24 months. They ordered a freeze on all organizational spending. My mother felt the walls closing in. The power she wielded was evaporating. Her usual manipulation tactics failed, so she resorted to anger. Since her primary phone number was blocked, she created a brand new email account just to contact me. A message appeared in my inbox with no subject line. The text was drenched in venom. Brenda accused me of being a vindictive, unstable woman. She claimed I was purposely tearing our family apart out of pure spite. She wrote that the missing funds were simply a routine accounting error. She insisted she intended to reimburse the charity after the new year. She ordered me to retract my statements and tell the board I was having a mental breakdown. She believed she could still bully me into submission. She thought her angry words would make me cower and apologize. She severely underestimated the woman she raised. I did not reply to her email. Engaging with an abuser only feeds their need for attention. Instead, I took a screenshot of her message. I opened a new draft addressed directly to the independent auditor reviewing the charity accounts. I had his contact information from the initial corporate loan documents. I attached the screenshot. I typed a brief professional note stating that the executive director was actively attempting to downplay her embezzlement as an accounting error and was pressuring witnesses to alter their testimonies. I clicked send. The evidence of her guilt was now safely in the hands of the authorities. I closed my laptop and walked toward my living room window. I looked out over the Phoenix skyline. The city was bustling with holiday shoppers unaware of the domestic war I just concluded. I thought the financial ruin would force my parents to surrender. I assumed the threat of an audit would make them retreat into silence. I was wrong. A narcissist never accepts defeat without trying to destroy the person who exposed them. My mother realized she could not intimidate me in private. She realized the bank would not release the funds. She knew the charity board was coming for her reputation. With her back against the wall, she decided to change her strategy. If she could not control my actions, she would control how everyone else viewed me. She reached for her contact list, preparing to launch a coordinated attack on my character. The real battle for the truth was just about to begin. My mother realized her private intimidation tactics had failed. The bank refused to unlock the commercial account. The charity board was marching forward with a forensic audit. Brenda was backed into a corner with no financial leverage left. When a narcissist loses control of their victim, they immediately try to control how everyone else perceives that victim. Brenda switched to her oldest and most reliable strategy. She played the victim. For my entire life, Brenda controlled the family narrative. If I earned a perfect grade, she told her sisters I was obsessing over books because I lacked social skills. When Ashley crashed a car in high school, Brenda spun it as a minor scrape caused by a dangerous intersection. She was a master at planting tiny seeds of doubt. Now she needed a massive harvest to save her reputation. She spent the entire weekend working the phones. She called every aunt, uncle, and older cousin in our extended family. She did not just lie. She orchestrated a theatrical performance. She wept into the receiver. She claimed my demanding corporate job in Phoenix had finally pushed me over the edge into a severe mental breakdown. She told Uncle Robert I was suffering from paranoia. She told Aunt Diane I was trying to bankrupt my own father out of pure spite because I was jealous of my younger sister. She painted a picture of a bitter, unstable spinster trying to destroy her loving parents. Her campaign worked at first. Our relatives were conditioned to believe the matriarch. By Sunday morning, my phone started ringing. The people who had not spoken to me in months suddenly felt entitled to manage my behavior. Uncle Robert left a long voicemail telling me to drop this silly credit dispute before I caused my father to have a heart attack. A cousin texted me a Bible verse about honoring your parents. But the most frustrating call came from Aunt Diane. Diane was my mother's older sister. She held a lot of influence in the family hierarchy. When Diane spoke, the rest of the relatives fell in line. She called me on Sunday afternoon. I answered because I respected her. Diane used a soft, patronizing tone. She told me she understood corporate risk analysts faced a lot of daily stress. She suggested I take a leave of absence from my firm. Then she urged me to apologize to Brenda and call the bank to clear up the accounting error. She said making my parents look like criminals was an embarrassment to the entire bloodline. She told me I needed to swallow my pride, fix the accounts, and save the family from public ruin. The old version of me would have cried. The woman I was before Thanksgiving would have spent an hour on the phone pleading with Aunt Diane, desperately trying to explain my side of the story. I would have typed out huge paragraphs defending my character. But that woman died the moment Brenda slapped my face. I did not argue with Aunt Diane. I did not raise my voice. I simply told her I had to review some documents and ended the call. I sat down at my kitchen island and opened the large family group chat on my phone. Brenda created this chat group years ago. She used it as her personal broadcasting channel to brag about Ashley's fake accomplishments and post pictures of her country club dinners. It was her digital throne room. It was time to burn it down. I did not type a long explanation. The truth does not require a defensive essay. The truth only requires evidence. First, I opened the encrypted folder on my phone. I selected the PDF file containing the forged consulting invoice. This was the exact document Brenda manufactured to funnel $15,000 from the corporate credit line directly into Ashley's personal checking account. The file clearly showed the charity funds being misdirected to A-List Consulting, LLC. It showed Ashley's name. It showed the date. I uploaded the PDF into the family chat. Next, I opened my photo gallery. I selected the screen recording of Ashley's live stream. I cropped the video so it started right before I asked my question and ended right after the sound of the slap echoed across the dining room. It was raw, unedited proof of the physical abuse and the verbal confrontation regarding the stolen money. I uploaded the video file into the chat right beneath the invoice. I added one single sentence of text. I wrote, "This is the silly accounting error causing my mental breakdown." I pressed send. I set my phone face up on the counter and watched the delivery receipts. The tiny icons popped up one by one as my aunts, uncles, and cousins opened the chat. I could picture them sitting in their living rooms. I imagined Uncle Robert squinting at the invoice. I imagined Aunt Diane putting on her reading glasses and pressing play on the video. I imagined them watching the matriarch they respected strike her own daughter across the face because she was caught stealing. The family group chat went dead silent. 10 minutes passed. Nobody typed a word. The usual flood of heart emojis and supportive messages Brenda always received was gone. The silence was heavier than any argument could ever be. My relatives were experiencing a collective realization. They were processing the undeniable fact that Brenda had not just been a strict mother. She was an active fraudster who used physical force to protect her theft. 15 minutes later, a typing bubble appeared at the bottom of the screen. It was Aunt Diane. The woman who had just scolded me on the phone for embarrassing the family was now staring at hard felony evidence. Diane did not send a private message. She chose to address the situation in front of the entire family. Her response was short, clinical, and devastating. Diane wrote, "Brenda, you stole money from your own daughter to buy Ashley jewelry. You need serious help." The notification hung there for everyone to see. The most respected elder in the family had just convicted my mother in the court of public opinion. Uncle Robert replied a moment later with a simple text saying he was disgusted. Brenda saw her empire collapsing in real time. Her carefully crafted image as the selfless, wealthy, charitable matriarch shattered into pieces. The people whose opinions she valued more than her own children now viewed her as a common thief and a liar. Panic set in. Brenda realized she could not delete other people's messages. She could not erase Aunt Diane's judgment from their screens. In a frantic attempt to hide her shame, Brenda used her administrator privileges and permanently deleted the entire family group chat. The chat vanished from my phone. It was a digital retreat. She burned her own throne room to the ground because she could no longer control the people standing inside it. I smiled at the empty screen. The smear campaign was officially dead. She tried to isolate me, but she only succeeded in exiling herself. The extended family now knew the truth, and they would never look at her or Ashley the same way again. The financial freeze locked their accounts, the charity board stripped her power, and the Family Whisper Network turned against her. Brenda was neutralized. She had no moves left to play. However, I had forgotten about the silent participant in this tragedy. My father had stayed quietly in the background during the smear campaign. Richard always preferred to let his wife do the dirty work while he kept his hands clean. He watched Brenda lose her charity, her reputation, and her family standing. He realized his human shield was gone. With the first of the month rapidly approaching and the mortgage default looming over his head, Richard panicked. He knew text messages and phone calls would not work on me anymore. He needed to apply physical pressure. He needed a signature. A week later, he took a desperate solo action that proved he was much worse than a silent enabler. He tracked me down in person, waiting in the shadows of my own apartment building, holding a piece of paper that would reveal his ultimate betrayal. A full week passed since my mother detonated her own reputation inside that digital chat room. The silence from Scottsdale felt unfamiliar, but welcome. I spent my days analyzing corporate risk portfolios at my firm in downtown Phoenix. I spent my evenings enjoying the quiet peace of my apartment. I foolishly believed the worst was over. I assumed the freezing of their accounts and the pending charity audit had finally forced them into submission. I was wrong. The financial drought was pushing them toward sheer desperation. It happened on a cold Tuesday evening. I left my office late, driving back to my complex after a long day of evaluating compliance reports. I pulled my car into the underground parking structure beneath my building. The concrete pillars cast long shadows under the flickering fluorescent lights. I turned off the engine and gathered my purse. As I stepped out of my vehicle, a figure emerged from the stairwell shadows. My heart spiked. I gripped my keys tightly between my fingers, a habit every woman living in a city learns early. The man stepped into the pale light. It was my father. Richard looked nothing like the proud logistics executive who hosted Thanksgiving dinner. The tailored sweater was gone. He wore a wrinkled button-down shirt that hung loose over his belt. His shoulders slouched. Deep purple bags hung under his eyes, and he had not shaved in days. He looked frail, aged, and terrified. He did not reach out to hug me. He did not ask how my week was going. He walked straight toward my car, his dress shoes echoing off the cement walls. He stopped 3 feet away and pulled a thick manila folder from under his arm. "Marina," he whispered. His voice cracked dry and hoarse. "I need you to read this." He extended his trembling hand, offering the folder. I did not take it right away. My professional instincts flared. I learned a long time ago never to accept unverified paperwork from desperate people. I stood my ground and asked him what he was doing waiting in the shadows of my home. Richard cleared his throat and tried to stand taller, attempting to summon the old authority he used to wield over me. He said he brought a solution to our family problem. He claimed his lawyers drafted a settlement that would make the bank fraud investigation disappear and save the charity from a public scandal. I took the folder. The paper felt heavy in my hands. I flipped open the cover and scanned the top page. It was a formal legal affidavit, complete with notarization lines at the bottom. The document contained a detailed narrative explaining that the commercial credit line was mishandled due to a severe miscommunication. The text explicitly stated that I, Marina Smith, took full responsibility for the accounting errors. It indemnified Richard and Brenda from all financial mismanagement and criminal intent. My eyes scanned the legal jargon. They wanted me to sign a sworn confession. They wanted me to admit to bank fraud. I flipped to the second page. It was a promissory note. The contract stated that if I signed the affidavit and accepted the blame, Richard promised to repay the stolen funds over a 10-year period. He was offering me an installment plan for a crime I did not commit. I looked up from the pages. The cold Arizona air whipped through the parking garage. I stared at the man who helped create me. I asked him to explain the logic of this proposal. I asked him why an innocent woman holding a secure career as a senior risk analyst should voluntarily confess to a federal crime just to shield her abusive mother. Richard ran a shaking hand through his graying hair. He lowered his voice, looking around the empty garage as if the concrete pillars were listening. He begged me to understand the stakes. He said if the bank pressed charges, Brenda would go to federal prison. He said the charity board was already preparing a lawsuit that would drain their remaining assets. He pleaded with me to sign the paper, insisting my spotless record and corporate connections would result in a mere slap on the wrist. He told me a daughter must sacrifice for her parents. I handed the unsigned papers back to him. I told him he was delusional. I reminded him that I found the forged invoices. I told him I knew Brenda funneled $15,000 to a fake consulting firm owned by Ashley. I asked him why he was willing to let me take the fall to protect his wife when he knew she was the one stealing. Richard stared at the concrete floor. His jaw tightened. A strange look of pure defeat washed over his features. He let out a long, ragged sigh. He confessed the truth he had hidden from everyone, even Brenda. Richard told me the stolen money did not just buy designer bags and luxury sedans. The truth was far worse. 3 years ago, his logistics company suffered a catastrophic loss. He lost his 2 biggest freight contracts. Instead of downsizing his lifestyle or admitting failure, he took out a high-interest loan from a group of unregulated private lenders. He invested the borrowed capital into a risky side venture involving commercial real estate, hoping to double his money and save his company. The venture failed. The private lenders demanded immediate repayment. They threatened to take his home, his business assets, and ruin his reputation. Richard was drowning in secret debt. He could not tell Brenda because her entire identity relied on his wealth. So when the charity funds became available, and when they tricked me into co-signing the commercial credit line, Richard saw an escape route. He actively helped Brenda launder the money through Ashley's fake consulting firm. He allowed his wife to buy jewelry to keep her distracted, while he skimmed a large portion of the stolen funds to pay off his dangerous private creditors. He was not protecting Brenda. He was protecting himself. If the forensic audit proceeded, the investigators would follow the money trail right to his personal accounts. They would uncover his hidden debts. They would see his active participation in the embezzlement. Brenda would realize her husband was a bankrupt fraud who used her charity to save his own skin. Richard looked up at me with tears pooling in his eyes. He admitted he was a coward. He begged me to sign the affidavit to buy him time. He swore he would figure out a way to pay the bank back if I just took the initial heat. The silence stretched between us. The hum of the garage ventilation system echoed in my ears. The man standing before me was not a father. He was a parasite. He spent my entire life teaching me that obedience was the only way to earn his love. He molded me into a responsible, meticulous adult, specifically so he could one day use my pristine reputation as a human shield. I did not raise my voice. The realization left me feeling cold and deeply hollow. I told him my answer. I said a real father protects his daughter from the fire. A real parent stands in front of the flames to keep their child safe. I looked him in the eyes and told him he was trying to throw me into the inferno just to stop his own shoes from catching fire. He reached out, trying to grab my arm. He pleaded, saying I was his only hope. I stepped back out of his reach. I told him to leave my property before I called the police and handed them his confession myself. Richard froze. He saw the cold determination in my stare. He realized the obedient daughter he raised was gone forever. He slowly lowered his hand, gripping the useless manila folder against his chest. I turned my back on him. I unlocked my car door and climbed back into the driver's seat. I started the engine, the roar of the motor echoing through the concrete structure. I did not look back as I put the vehicle in reverse and backed out of my parking spot. I drove toward the exit ramp, leaving my father standing alone in the shadows with his secrets. I drove around the block for 20 minutes, letting my hands stop shaking before returning to my apartment. I thought rejecting his illegal settlement would end their plotting. I thought my firm refusal would finally force them to face the authorities on their own. But Richard went home empty-handed. He walked into that Scottsdale rental and told Brenda her last lifeline was gone. He told her I refused to sign. Brenda realized she was out of options. The walls were closing in, and her panic morphed into unhinged rage. If she was going to lose her status, her charity, and her wealth, she decided, I needed to lose everything too. Since I would not sacrifice my career to save her, she packed her purse and prepared to destroy my livelihood herself. The next morning, the battle moved from the private shadows of a parking garage to the bright fluorescent lobby of my corporate headquarters. The morning after Richard failed to secure my signature in the parking garage, the tension in my chest morphed into a cold focus. I woke up before dawn. I drank a glass of water and drove to my office in downtown Phoenix. My workplace was a fortress of logic. I work for a premier financial compliance firm. We investigate corporate vulnerabilities. We build firewalls around assets. We deal with facts. When I arrived on the 14th floor, the environment felt safe. The glass walls and polished steel surfaces offered a sharp contrast to the messy, emotional warfare happening in Scottsdale. Because my entire career depends on maintaining a pristine professional record, I always operate with extreme transparency. 2 days prior, I scheduled a private meeting with my department director. His name is Marcus. I sat in his office and laid out the exact details of the situation. I handed him the bank freeze confirmation and explained that my parents might attempt to leverage my employment against me. Marcus did not judge me. He reviewed the paperwork, thanked me for being proactive, and notified Human Resources to flag my file. He also placed a standard security alert at the front desk downstairs. I neutralized the threat before my mother even realized she had a weapon. Brenda did not know any of this. She woke up on Wednesday morning facing a financial apocalypse. Richard told her I rejected their illegal settlement. The mortgage payment was looming. The charity board was gathering their own evidence. Her back was pressed firmly against the wall. When a controller loses their grip, they resort to public sabotage. She decided that if she was going down, she would drag my career down with her. Around 10 in the morning, I was sitting at my desk reviewing a risk portfolio. 5 floors below me, the sliding glass doors of the main lobby parted. Brenda marched into the building. She usually maintained a flawless appearance, but the stress was visibly rotting her facade. Her expensive silk blouse was wrinkled. Her hair lacked its usual perfect volume. She walked straight past the waiting area and approached the main reception desk. The lobby was filled with corporate professionals visiting clients and administrative staff. It was the exact audience she wanted for her performance. She slapped her palms flat against the marble countertop. She leaned toward the young woman working the reception computer. "I need to speak to the manager of Marina Smith right now," my mother demanded. Her voice echoed off the high ceiling, loud enough to stop conversations nearby. The receptionist remained perfectly calm. She asked for my mother's name and purpose of visit. Brenda raised her volume, ensuring everyone in the room could hear her next sentence. She claimed she was my mother. She announced that I was a deceitful thief. She told the receptionist I was financially abusing my elderly parents and stealing money from a charity fund. She demanded my immediate termination, insisting that a financial compliance firm could not employ a woman who robbed her own family. She expected chaos. She expected the receptionist to gasp and call my boss in a panic. She expected to humiliate me so profoundly that the firm would fire me just to avoid a scandal. Instead, the receptionist pressed a silent button beneath her desk. My workplace deals with hostile clients, angry investors, and tense financial disputes on a weekly basis. Security is airtight. Within 30 seconds, 2 large guards in dark suits stepped out from a nearby elevator bank. They approached Brenda from behind. At that exact moment, Marcus stepped off a different elevator. He was returning from a morning coffee run. He saw the commotion and walked over to the desk. The receptionist quietly identified Brenda. Marcus did not look shocked. He did not look angry. He looked at my mother with polite indifference. He told her she was trespassing in a private corporate facility. He informed her that Human Resources was already fully aware of the ongoing bank fraud investigation involving her name. He said her fabricated accusations held no weight here. Brenda froze. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her grand ambush crumbled in an instant. The audience of professionals staring at her were not judging me. They were pitying the unhinged woman making a scene in a corporate lobby. Marcus gestured toward the exit. He instructed the 2 guards to escort the trespasser off the property. The reality of her failure broke her remaining composure. As the guards placed their hands firmly on her elbows, she started thrashing. She yelled my name. She shouted that I owed her my life. She shrieked that I would burn in hell for abandoning my blood. The guards did not argue. They simply marched her backward toward the sliding glass doors. They pushed her out onto the hot Phoenix sidewalk and stood blocking the entrance. I did not witness the spectacle in person. Marcus came upstairs 10 minutes later and asked me to step into his office. He closed the door and recounted the entire event. He handed me a copied flash drive containing the high-definition security footage from the lobby cameras. He also gave me the official incident report filed by the security team. My mother handed me a loaded gun and pointed it directly at her own head. Instead of getting me fired, her ambush provided me with indisputable, documented proof of harassment and attempted defamation. I left work early that afternoon and drove straight to my attorney's office. My lawyer watched the security footage. She read the incident report. She took immediate action. By 3 o'clock, her paralegal finalized a brutal document. I hired a private process server. I wanted the delivery to be swift and undeniable. Just before dinner time, a man in a plain polo shirt knocked on the heavy wooden door of the Scottsdale rental house. Brenda answered. She looked exhausted from her failed morning attack. The man asked her to confirm her identity. When she said her name, he shoved a thick manila envelope against her chest and walked away. Brenda opened the envelope standing in her doorway. Inside was a formal cease and desist order, drafted on heavy legal letterhead. The language was sharp and merciless. The document outlined her unprovoked attack at my corporate office. It stated that any further contact, whether in person, by phone, or through third parties, would result in an immediate restraining order. It barred her from approaching my home, my workplace, or my associates. But the final paragraph was the true lethal blow. My lawyer included a formal notification of my legal stance regarding the missing money. The letter explicitly stated that I was actively cooperating with the federal bank fraud investigation and the charity audit. It confirmed I had surrendered all text messages, forged invoices, and live stream videos to the authorities. I wanted her to know that her secrets were sitting on a detective's desk. Brenda was completely boxed in. She could not intimidate me at work. She could not bully me at home. She could not manipulate the extended family. She had no money, no leverage, and no escape route. The trap I built had locked its jaws around her ankles. She retreated into her rented house and slammed the door. She thought she hit rock bottom. She thought the worst consequences had already arrived. She was entirely incorrect. The legal paperwork was only the beginning of the avalanche. While Brenda hid inside her house counting her remaining days of freedom, the frozen funds were triggering automatic defaults across the city. The bank was clawing back unauthorized charges, and their aggressive recovery tactics were about to strike the golden child. The shiny new status symbol sitting in my sister's driveway was about to vanish. 2 weeks before Christmas, the Arizona air turned sharp and crisp. The holiday season usually meant forced family gatherings and expensive dinners that I ended up financing. This year, my calendar remained empty and my bank account stayed securely under my own control. The silence from Scottsdale held firm, but the wheels of institutional justice never stopped turning. Financial institutions do not care about holiday cheer, family loyalty, or emotional excuses. They only care about balancing their ledgers and eliminating risk. On a Tuesday morning, I received a certified letter from the commercial bank. I stood at my kitchen counter and sliced the thick envelope open. The document contained the formal results of their preliminary fraud review. Because I preemptively provided the forged invoices, the hidden transaction records, and the exact timestamps of the unauthorized charges, the corporate investigators moved with brutal speed. They officially flagged the down payment transferred to the luxury auto dealership as stolen capital. The letter confirmed the funds were being seized and reversed. The financial domino effect is a fascinating mechanism to witness from the outside. Once the bank issued the chargeback, the dealership lost their cash deposit. Corporate car dealerships do not absorb losses out of the goodness of their hearts. Their finance department immediately reviewed the account and invalidated the auto loan contract written in my sister's name. Ashley thought a signature and a smile made the expensive car hers. She did not understand that a vehicle belongs to the bank until the final cent clears the registry. She lacked the basic financial literacy I spent years trying to teach her. While I drank my coffee and read the legal confirmation, Ashley was living in a state of deep, orchestrated denial. I knew her habits well. Despite losing her boutique sponsorships and local brand deals after the viral Thanksgiving video, she spent the first 2 weeks of December trying to maintain her online illusion. She posted recycled photographs of herself standing next to the silver sedan, adding festive holiday captions. She believed our mother would conjure a miracle. She thought Brenda would somehow produce the missing cash, smooth over the misunderstanding, and save her public image. She assumed the rules of the real world did not apply to the golden child. Reality arrived on a flatbed truck. I was sitting in my living room that evening, reviewing a stack of risk assessment files for my firm. My phone chimed. I had blocked Ashley's primary number weeks ago, but she circumvented the restriction by sending a direct video message through an alternative social media application. I tapped the screen to open the incoming file. The footage was chaotic, frantic, and raw. The video did not feature her usual ring lights or carefully applied makeup. Ashley was standing on her front lawn wearing her silk pajamas. Her hair was a tangled mess. The morning sun cast long shadows across her manicured grass, highlighting the sheer panic on her face. Behind her, a heavy-duty tow truck was backing into her driveway. The amber warning lights flashed rhythmically, reflecting off the shiny silver paint of her prized luxury sedan. Ashley held her phone with a shaking hand, accidentally recording her own humiliation. She marched toward the driver, a burly man wearing a high-visibility vest. She shrieked at him, demanding he drop the vehicle immediately. She claimed there was a huge mistake. She insisted her mother was a wealthy charity director who would sue his towing company into bankruptcy if he touched the bumper. The driver did not even look at her. He operated the hydraulic levers with practiced mechanical efficiency. The steel hooks slid beneath the front axle of the sedan. The heavy chains rattled loudly, securing the chassis. Within seconds, the front tires lifted off the concrete. The camera panned wildly as Ashley rushed forward. Through the shaking lens, I saw her neighbors stepping out onto their porches. The woman who lived next door stood in her driveway, holding a watering can, staring openly at the spectacle. The man across the street paused his lawnmower to watch the neighborhood princess lose her prized possession. Ashley spent months bragging to these exact people about her successful real estate career and her wealthy, generous family. Now, they were witnessing a standard repossession in broad daylight. The truck engine roared. The driver climbed into the cab, shifted gears, and pulled away from the curb, dragging her fake status symbol down the asphalt street. The video ended abruptly. A barrage of text messages followed immediately after. Ashley typed fast, her words dripping with venom and desperation. She blamed me for the entire ordeal. She typed that I ruined her life. She claimed I made her a laughingstock in her own neighborhood. She accused me of plotting to destroy her happiness because I could not stand seeing her succeed. She demanded I call the bank and reinstate the loan, insisting she needed the car to survive. I sat on my sofa and read her frantic demands. I did not feel an ounce of pity. I did not feel a shred of guilt. Ashley always treated me like a broken ATM. She happily accepted gifts bought with stolen money, knowing I was the one bearing the financial risk. She laughed when our mother struck my face. She only cared about the fraud when the consequences finally arrived on her doorstep and took away her shiny toy. I placed my fingers on the digital keyboard. I did not write a long paragraph defending myself. I did not explain the mechanics of a bank chargeback. I typed a single, sharp sentence. Brenda ruined your credit. I just stopped paying for it. I hit send and closed the application. That simple sentence acted like a mirror, forcing her to finally look at the ugly truth. The illusion shattered instantly. Ashley realized our mother's favoritism was not a blessing. It was a toxic poison. Brenda had not given her a generous holiday gift. Brenda handed her stolen goods, dragging her into a federal bank fraud investigation. By putting the fake consulting firm in Ashley's name, and by putting the invalid auto loan on Ashley's credit report, our mother made her an accessory to embezzlement. The golden child finally understood the heavy price of being the favorite. Without a vehicle, her daily life collapsed. Ashley worked as a part-time real estate agent, a job that requires driving wealthy clients to expensive property showings across the sprawling Phoenix suburbs. She could no longer commute to the brokerage office. She could not attend networking events. She could not meet prospective buyers. Her income evaporated overnight. She was trapped in a high-rent suburban townhouse she could no longer afford. The boutique owners ignored her emails. Her influencer audience turned into a mob of critics, constantly leaving mocking comments about the viral Thanksgiving video. The lavish lifestyle she thought she deserved vanished, leaving her isolated, immobile, and broke. Ashley was grounded, literally and financially. Her downfall was swift, but she was merely a byproduct of the real crime. The true architect of this disaster was still hiding in Scottsdale. Brenda thought she could lay low and weather the storm while the bank sorted out the credit dispute. She assumed the charity board would eventually sweep the missing funds under the rug to protect the organization's public image. She severely underestimated the ruthlessness of a corporate board protecting its own assets. While Ashley wept over her towed car, a team of independent forensic accountants finalized their report on the Heritage Charity Fund. They documented every hidden transfer, every fake invoice and every personal country club charge my mother tried to conceal. The holidays were approaching, but Brenda was not getting a season of forgiveness. She was about to receive a devastating legal strike, and the very people she spent years trying to impress were the ones holding the hammer. I went to sleep that night knowing the quiet was temporary. Tomorrow, the charity board would issue their ruling, and the fallout would strip my mother of the only thing she valued more than money. Her precious public status was about to be dragged into the unforgiving light, and this time, there was no daughter left to bail her out. While Ashley wept in her driveway over a repossessed vehicle, a much larger storm was brewing in downtown Phoenix. The financial web my mother spun was unraveling from multiple directions. The bank chargeback destroyed my sister's fake lifestyle. But the true reckoning belonged to Brenda. Financial institutions move with a slow, grinding certainty. Corporate charity boards, however, move with swift and brutal self-preservation. 3 days before the Christmas holiday, my phone rang. I was sitting at my desk analyzing a risk portfolio when an unfamiliar downtown number flashed on my screen. I answered with my professional greeting. The voice on the other end belonged to Dr. Evelyn. She was a prominent corporate attorney who served on the executive board for the Heritage Charity Fund. I knew her by reputation. She was sharp, clinical, and fiercely protective of the organization's public standing. Dr. Evelyn did not exchange pleasantries. She did not ask how my holiday season was going. She spoke with a cold urgency that commanded immediate attention. She informed me that the independent forensic audit was nearing its conclusion, but the investigators needed to cross-reference a few specific data points. She asked if I was willing to verify the exact timelines regarding the commercial credit line tied to my name. I did not hesitate. I opened my encrypted file folder on my computer monitor. I told the attorney I had everything she needed. Dr. Evelyn read off a series of dates and transaction amounts. I matched her numbers against the hidden banking ledger I downloaded weeks ago. Our records aligned flawlessly. I confirmed the exact hour the fraudulent consulting invoice was generated. I verified the exact day the luxury car down payment cleared the account. Then I offered her the final nail from my mother's coffin. I told Dr. Evelyn I possessed the digital metadata proving Brenda created the fake consulting company on her own home computer. The attorney let out a long, heavy exhale. She thanked me for my transparency and provided a secure server address. I uploaded my entire evidence packet directly to the charity legal team. I clicked send, handing over the absolute proof of my mother's guilt. The forensic audit concluded 48 hours later, and the findings were devastating. The investigators uncovered a financial rot much deeper than a few fake invoices. Brenda had not merely leveraged my credit line to buy her favorite daughter expensive jewelry. She had been systematically bleeding the charity operating funds for over 14 months. My mother treated the nonprofit organization like her own personal piggy bank. The auditors discovered a shocking trail of commingled accounts. When wealthy donors bought premium tables for the annual spring gala, Brenda funneled a percentage of those ticket sales directly into her private checking account. She used the stolen donor money to pay her exorbitant monthly dues at her exclusive Scottsdale Country Club. She skimmed proceeds from charity silent auctions and wired the cash to Richard, helping him temporarily satisfy the aggressive private lenders he kept hidden from everyone. Brenda built a grand illusion of philanthropy, but she was nothing more than a common thief wearing a designer blouse. The board of directors did not wait for the new year to handle the crisis. They convened an emergency vote that Friday morning. They did not invite Brenda into the plush boardroom to explain herself. They did not offer her the dignity of a quiet resignation. They summoned her to the corporate lobby, flanked her with building security guards, and handed her a formal termination letter. They fired her with cause. They stripped her of the executive director title she worshipped. They seized her company laptop, deactivated her building access, and ordered her to leave the premises immediately. But a simple corporate firing was not enough to satisfy their fiduciary duty to their donors. The board needed to publicly distance themselves from the theft. Dr. Evelyn marched straight from the boardroom to the downtown police precinct. Acting on behalf of the charity, she filed a formal criminal report for corporate embezzlement against my mother. The scandal could not be contained behind closed doors. Secrets in high society always carry a price tag, and someone was eager to cash in. By Monday morning, a prominent Phoenix business blog published a scathing, detailed article exposing the missing funds. I was eating breakfast when a coworker forwarded me the link. The headline plastered my mother's name across the internet. The article detailed her sudden termination, the police report, and the gross misuse of donor money. It painted Brenda as a greedy fraud who stole from the community to finance her own luxury lifestyle. The public fallout was spectacular. The very same wealthy socialites who sat at our Thanksgiving table, the women who clapped and cheered when Brenda handed out diamond rings, read that article over their morning coffee. High society operates on strict rules of association. Wealthy people do not tolerate the stench of poverty, and they absolutely despise the stain of public scandal. Brenda was suddenly a radioactive liability. Her friends vanished instantly. Women she had known for decades blocked her phone number. The invitations to holiday parties stopped arriving. People who used to kiss her cheek at charity luncheons now pretended they did not know her name. The final humiliating blow arrived via courier. The board of directors at her prestigious country club held their own emergency meeting after the blog post went viral. They drafted a certified letter and delivered it to her front door. The letter informed Brenda that her membership was permanently revoked due to conduct unbecoming of the institution. They banned her from the golf course, the dining room, and the spa. They erased her from their elite roster. The power, influence, and status my mother spent 20 years building evaporated in a single afternoon. She sacrificed her relationship with me to fund a fake empire, and now that empire was reduced to ash. Brenda sat trapped inside her rented Scottsdale mansion. The walls of the enormous house felt like a prison. She was surrounded by mounting debts she could no longer hide. She faced a looming criminal investigation that could end in a federal indictment. She had no job, no social circle, and no reliable daughter left to bail her out. The isolation began to drive her to the brink of insanity. She realized her intimidation tactics failed. She knew her smear campaign backfired. She understood that her fake reality was permanently destroyed. But a cornered animal will always attempt one final strike before surrendering to the trap. Desperation breeds foolish decisions. With the police asking questions and the mortgage lenders threatening imminent eviction, my parents decided they had to see me in person. They convinced themselves that money could buy my silence. They scraped together their last remaining dollars, setting the stage for a pathetic, desperate ambush at a cheap diner on the edge of town, hoping they could bribe the daughter they used to abuse. The criminal complaint filed by the charity board sent a shockwave through my parents' rented Scottsdale mansion. The corporate theft was no longer a private family dispute. It was an active police investigation. Brenda realized her country club friends could not save her. She knew her deleted group chats would not protect her from a federal prosecutor. The only person standing between her and a prison sentence was the daughter she had slapped across the face on Thanksgiving Day. 4 days before Christmas, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. It was Richard. He bypassed my digital blocks by purchasing a cheap prepaid cell phone. His message was brief and drenched in panic. He begged me to meet them at a neutral location on the edge of town. He claimed they were ready to surrender and wanted to offer a formal apology. He insisted they wanted to make things right before the holiday. I knew they were lying. Narcissists do not apologize when they are cornered. They negotiate. But I agreed to the meeting anyway. I needed to look them in the eye and permanently sever the cord. I needed them to understand that their control over my life was completely extinguished. I did not go alone. I brought my fiancé, Liam. Liam is a structural engineer. He spends his days inspecting the foundations of high-rise buildings, searching for hidden fractures that could bring a tower down. He spent the last 3 years watching my parents slowly chip away at my foundation. He witnessed the late-night phone calls demanding money. He saw the toll their financial emergencies took on my health. Liam never pushed me to abandon my family, but he always stood ready to support me when the structure finally collapsed. When I told him about the diner meeting, he simply grabbed his car keys and told me he was driving. We drove out to a rundown diner on the dusty outskirts of Phoenix. The restaurant sat next to a desolate truck stop miles away from the manicured lawns of Scottsdale. It was the kind of cheap, grimy establishment my mother used to mock. The neon sign above the entrance flickered, and the parking lot was riddled with deep potholes. We walked through the glass doors. The air inside smelled of stale coffee and burnt grease. I spotted my parents sitting in a cracked red vinyl booth in the far back corner. As we approached the table, the physical toll of their ruined empire became startlingly clear. Brenda looked 10 years older. The woman who obsessively maintained a flawless, youthful appearance now had deep wrinkles around her mouth. Her hair was pulled back into a messy knot. She wore a faded gray sweater instead of her usual designer silk. Richard sat beside her, staring blankly at the laminated menu. His posture was totally defeated, his shoulders curled inward like a beaten dog. Liam and I slid into the booth across from them. We did not order food. I placed my hands flat on the sticky tabletop and waited for them to speak. Brenda tried to summon her old charm. She forced a weak, trembling smile. She reached across the table, attempting to grab my hand. I pulled my fingers back, keeping my hands resting near my lap. Her smile faltered. She launched into a rehearsed speech. She spoke in a hushed, pleading whisper. She claimed the past few weeks had taught her a valuable lesson about humility. She said she finally realized how much pressure she placed on my shoulders. She blamed the charity embezzlement on immense stress, claiming she lost track of the ledgers because she was trying to hold the family together. She begged for a chance to heal our relationship. Then Richard reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a folded slip of paper and slid it across the table. It came to a stop right in front of me. I looked down. It was a personal check written out to my name. Brenda leaned forward, her eyes wide with desperate hope. She called it a good faith payment. She said they scraped together $2,000 by selling some furniture. She asked me to accept the money as a token of their renewed commitment to paying me back. She gently suggested that if I cashed the check, I could call the bank fraud division and tell them the dispute was resolved. She wanted me to call off the investigation. My parents owed me tens of thousands of dollars. $2,000 was a pathetic fraction of the money they stole. But my career as a senior risk analyst trained me to never trust a document presented by a desperate debtor. I picked up the check. I examined the front. The date was correct. The amount was written clearly. Then I flipped the rectangular piece of paper over. There, printed in tiny, meticulous ink along the endorsement line on the back, was a specific legal clause. It was a restrictive endorsement. The tiny, handwritten sentence stated that cashing this check constituted a full and final settlement of all outstanding debts, liabilities, and fraud claims. A cold wave of disgust washed over me. This was not an apology. This was a calculated legal trap. If I deposited that $2,000 into my bank account, my signature on the back would legally bind me to their terms. I would inadvertently forfeit my right to pursue the remaining stolen funds. Worse, my endorsement would act as a civil settlement, giving their defense attorney a powerful tool to dismiss the criminal bank fraud charges. My mother thought I was stupid. She believed the obedient, people-pleasing daughter she raised would see a tiny bit of cash, feel a surge of guilt, and sign away her legal rights without reading the fine print. I placed the check back on the table. I placed my index finger on the paper and slowly slid it back across the sticky surface until it bumped against my mother's cold coffee mug. I looked directly into her eyes. I told Brenda that accountability is not a negotiation. The fake smile vanished from her face. The realization that her final trap had failed shattered her fragile composure. Her lower lip trembled, and tears began spilling down her cheeks. But those tears were not born of remorse. They were tears of profound self-pity. She was mourning the loss of her own freedom. She slammed her palms against the table, rattling the silverware. Her voice rose, drawing the attention of the waitress standing near the counter. Brenda accused me of being a cold, heartless monster. She shrieked that I was sending my own mother to the slaughter. She asked how I could sleep at night knowing I was responsible for putting my parents in a prison cell. She tried to shift the blame, desperate to make me the villain of her story. I did not raise my voice. I simply told her she forged the documents, she stole the charity money, and she slapped me. I informed her that she built her own cage, and I was merely refusing to hand her the key. Richard kept his head down. He refused to look at me. He let his wife scream, terrified that intervening would draw my anger toward him. That was when Liam had seen enough. My fiancé placed his hands on the table and stood up. His presence was tall and imposing. He did not address my mother. He looked straight down at my father. Liam spoke with a quiet, lethal authority. He told Richard that a real man protects his family. He pointed out that Richard sat silently while his wife stole from his daughter, and he sat silently while his wife tried to manipulate her again today. Liam looked Richard directly in the eye and stated, "You let your wife do this to your child. We are done here." Richard flinched, as if he had been struck. He had no defense. He had no pride left to shield him. Liam reached down and gently placed his hand on my shoulder. I stood up, sliding out of the cracked vinyl booth. We turned our backs on the two desperate people sitting in the diner. We walked toward the exit, pushing through the glass doors and stepping out into the bright Arizona sunlight. We left the uncashed check sitting next to the cold coffee. We left their guilt, their debts, and their toxic manipulation sitting on that sticky table. As Liam drove us away from the diner, a profound sense of finality settled into my bones. My parents played their final card and lost. They had no money left to offer and no threats left to weaponize. Their legal defense was entirely shattered. But a cornered family dynamic is a dangerous thing. The authorities were no longer facing roadblocks. The police detectives investigating the charity embezzlement possessed all the ledgers. They traced the stolen funds moving through the corporate credit line. The investigators were following the money trail, and that trail led directly to a fake consulting firm. Brenda and Richard were out of options, but the authorities were just getting started. The detectives were preparing to knock on a new door. The golden child, who always avoided responsibility, was about to receive a visit from felony fraud investigators. Ashley was facing the terrifying reality of prison time, and a spoiled daughter facing a criminal indictment will always turn on the mother who created her. The diner meeting ended in a silent retreat, but the legal machinery churning in downtown Phoenix only accelerated. The Financial Crimes Unit assigned to the Heritage Charity Fund embezzlement possessed the frozen bank ledgers. They traced the stolen donor money flowing directly through the commercial credit line. The paper trail formed a bright, undeniable path straight to A-List Consulting, LLC. 2 days after my parents left that uncashed check on the sticky restaurant table, reality knocked on my sister's front door. Ashley was trapped inside her suburban rental. Without her luxury vehicle, she could not escape the mounting consequences of her choices. She spent her days pacing the hardwood floors, watching her influencer career dissolve into a public joke. She thought losing her brand sponsorships was the lowest point of her life. She assumed the worst punishment was the humiliation of her neighbors, watching a tow truck drag her status symbol down the street. She was wrong. The true penalty for her greed arrived on a Thursday morning. 2 plainclothes investigators stood on her porch. They did not care about her social media following. They did not care about her curated aesthetic. They carried thick manila folders containing printed copies of fraudulent invoices and forged bank transfers. They flashed their badges, stepped into her living room, and began asking very specific questions about her consulting business. For 28 years, my sister never faced a single consequence. When she failed algebra in high school, Brenda marched into the principal's office and blamed the teacher. When she dented a borrowed car during college, our mother blamed the narrow parking lot. Brenda spent decades shielding her favorite child from accountability, cultivating a profound sense of entitlement. But a mother cannot yell at a federal investigator. Brenda could not march into a police precinct and demand the detectives lower their voices. The investigators laid the printed invoices on Ashley's coffee table. They pointed to her signature on the limited liability company formation documents. They explained the legal definition of wire fraud, bank fraud, and corporate embezzlement. They informed her that the penalty for funneling stolen charity funds across state lines carried a mandatory prison sentence. Panic is a remarkable truth serum. The entitled facade shattered instantly. Ashley looked at the legal documents and realized a terrifying truth. Her name was on the business registry. Her name was on the bank account receiving the stolen cash. Brenda's name was nowhere to be found on the consulting firm paperwork. Our mother did not just hand her a fake job. Brenda constructed a firewall and placed her favorite daughter on the outside to take the burn. If the authorities demanded a fall guy, Ashley was legally positioned to absorb the full impact of the felony charges. Self-preservation overrides family loyalty when prison time enters the conversation. The golden child recognized she was being led to the slaughter. She did not call our parents for help. She knew they had no money and no power left. Instead, she picked up her phone and called the only person holding a winning hand. Ashley called my attorney. She took a rideshare service to downtown Phoenix that afternoon. She walked into the polished law office wearing gray sweatpants and dark sunglasses, a sharp contrast to the glamorous outfits she used to parade online. She sat across from my lawyer, shaking and crying, offering to trade everything she knew for a plea deal. Ashley did not just offer a verbal confession. She brought her cell phone. She unlocked the device, pushed it across the mahogany desk, and handed over an unedited treasure trove of digital evidence. My lawyer reviewed months of saved text messages between my mother and my sister. The conversations were explicit, cold, and calculated. Brenda sent direct instructions outlining exactly how to create the fake vendor account. One text message from Brenda read, "Open the template and put $4,000 for digital strategy. Then transfer the cash to your personal checking before the weekend." Another message warned, "Do not mention the consulting firm to your father. I need to secure the mortgage payment first." Ashley proved she was a willing participant in the scheme. She eagerly accepted the cash to fund her lavish trips. But the digital records established an undeniable fact. Brenda was the mastermind. Our mother pulled the strings, directed the stolen charity money, and weaponized my credit line from the very beginning. My attorney contacted Dr. Evelyn and the local prosecutors. They brokered a swift agreement. Because Ashley provided the smoking gun needed to secure a conviction against the charity director, the district attorney agreed to drop the felony fraud charges against her. She avoided a prison cell, but she did not escape justice. The board of directors demanded severe civil restitution. Ashley was ordered to repay the entire $15,000 she received, plus legal fees and punitive penalties. She signed a binding financial judgment. Her future wages would be garnished for years. Her credit score was ruined. She traded her freedom for a mountain of crippling debt. The moment the ink dried on her plea agreement, my phone received a long email. The sender was Ashley. I opened the message and read her words. She poured her heart out across 5 paragraphs. She detailed her terrifying encounter with the investigators. She explained how she handed over the text messages to save herself from an indictment. Then the tone shifted into a desperate apology. Ashley wrote that she finally understood how toxic our mother truly was. She admitted Brenda used both of us, turning me into a human ATM and turning her into a criminal shield. She confessed that she always felt inferior to my corporate success, and the fake influencer lifestyle was just a pathetic attempt to feel important. She thanked me for cutting off the money, stating the financial freeze was the harsh wake-up call she desperately needed. She ended the email by asking for a second chance. She hinted that her rent was due in 3 days, her car was gone, and she had nowhere else to turn. The old dynamic was creeping back into her language. She wanted the reliable older sister to swoop in, accept the apology, and write a check to solve her housing crisis. I sat at my kitchen island reading the emotional plea. A year ago, those words would have broken my heart. I would have drafted a budget, transferred funds to her account, and invited her to sleep in my guest room. Today, I felt nothing. The emotional manipulation simply bounced off my armor. Setting a boundary does not mean delivering a dramatic speech. It means allowing another adult to experience the full weight of their own choices. Ashley participated in stealing my identity. She laughed when I was physically struck. A forced apology born from the threat of homelessness does not erase the betrayal. I hit the reply button. I kept my response clinical, short, and final. Thank you for the truth. I wish you luck. I did not offer a loan. I did not ask about her lease. I did not invite her over for dinner. I pressed send and archived the email chain. My role as the family savior was officially retired. She was free from prison, but she would have to survive the real world using her own 2 hands. With Ashley securing legal immunity, the prosecutors possessed everything they needed to close the net around the primary target. The criminal investigation zeroed in entirely on the rented Scottsdale mansion. The stolen funds were gone. The credit accounts remained frozen. The golden child had defected to the other side, handing over the exact messages required to secure a warrant. Brenda and Richard were isolated, broke, and facing imminent legal ruin. They missed their first mortgage payment shortly after Thanksgiving. Now the harsh reality of February was approaching. The property management company overseeing their luxury rental did not care about family drama or pending indictments. The financial drought was about to produce its final humiliating consequence. The fake wealthy lifestyle was facing the ultimate eviction. By the time February arrived, the desert winter carried a sharp chill. The legal maneuvers and corporate audits of December had stripped my parents of their resources. The financial drought was now absolute. The commercial credit line I locked on Thanksgiving night remained frozen solid. The charity board severed my mother's substantial salary. My father could no longer use stolen donor funds to cover his failing business expenses. The fake wealth they paraded around Scottsdale required a constant influx of cash every single month just to maintain the illusion. Without my signature backing their accounts, they hit a solid brick wall. The sprawling rental house they pretended to own demanded an exorbitant monthly payment. They missed the December rent while fighting the fraud allegations. They missed January while paying legal retainers to keep Brenda out of a federal holding cell. When the first week of February passed without a wire transfer, the property management company lost their patience. Corporate landlords do not negotiate with embezzlers. On a Tuesday afternoon, a property agent walked up the manicured driveway and taped a bright yellow legal document directly to the custom mahogany front door. It was a 3-day pay-or-quit eviction notice. The notice flapped in the wind for hours before Richard came home and found it. The brightly colored paper acted like a beacon. The wealthy neighbors who used to attend my mother's dinner parties drove past the estate in their expensive vehicles. They saw the glaring yellow warning. The neighborhood gossip network ignited again. The same people who read the business blog detailing Brenda's charity theft now watched her face the ultimate upper-class humiliation. She was being forcibly thrown out of her own elite neighborhood. Richard knew the property managers would dispatch the sheriff's department by Friday morning if they did not vacate the premises. He had 48 hours to secure new housing. A man with ruined credit and an active federal investigation hovering over his family cannot qualify for a standard lease. He needed hard cash immediately. My father finally had to sacrifice his own prized possessions to save himself from sleeping on the street. He spent Wednesday driving to discount pawn shops across the valley. Richard carried his custom-fitted golf clubs into a dusty retail store. He stood in line behind desperate customers, clutching the titanium drivers he used to flaunt on the weekend greens. The broker offered him a humiliating low sum. Richard tried to negotiate, citing the premium brand names, but the clerk simply pointed toward the exit. He took the crumpled bills. Next, he visited a strip mall jeweler and surrendered his vintage watch collection. Those were the same timepieces he used to project dominance during boardroom meetings. His personal items were not enough to cover a standard security deposit. When he returned to the mansion, he walked straight into the master bedroom. He opened my mother's velvet jewelry boxes. He scooped up the remaining diamond earrings and gold bracelets that the authorities had not already seized as evidence. Brenda shrieked when she saw him taking her accessories. She tried to pry the wooden boxes out of his hands. She yelled that those items were her final pieces of dignity. For years, she controlled him with her sharp tongue, but Richard was fighting for basic survival now. He shoved her hands away. he told her they were about to be homeless. He informed her that her country club days were permanently over. He took her glittering treasures down to a local broker and traded her vanity for cash. The money was barely enough to secure a lease on a tiny 2-bedroom apartment in a rundown section of the city. Moving day was a chaotic, desperate scramble. They could not afford to hire a professional moving crew. The people who previously relied on catered meals and housekeepers were forced to pack their own boxes using discarded cardboard collected from local grocery stores. Richard rented a cheap hauling truck. He spent his Thursday dragging heavy furniture across the marble floors, scratching the expensive wood out of sheer exhaustion. Brenda refused to lift a single box. She sat on the front porch holding a designer purse she could no longer afford, watching her fake empire get stuffed into the back of a dirty rental truck. I was sitting at my desk at the financial compliance firm when my phone registered a blocked call. The notification went straight to my carrier server. I opened the application and read the digital transcript before playing the audio. My mother decided to use her final moments at the Scottsdale estate to hurl one last piece of venom at me. I pressed play and held the device to my ear. Her voice sounded thin, ragged, and unhinged. She did not apologize for stealing my identity. She did not express remorse for striking my face. Brenda left a bitter, resentful message designed to inflict maximum emotional damage. She told me she was standing in the empty hallway of her beautiful home, waiting to turn in the keys. She blamed me for their eviction. She hissed into the microphone, stating she hoped I was happy now that my parents were reduced to living like peasants. She told me I destroyed a loving family over a few missing dollars. I listened to the entire 2-minute recording. My heart rate did not elevate. My hands remained steady. Hearing her desperate attempt to manipulate my emotions only solidified my clarity. I realized a profound truth while listening to her hateful words. My mother never loved me. She only loved my utility. She loved the clean credit score I maintained. She loved the steady corporate salary I earned. She loved my willingness to silently absorb her problems and pay her bills. Once my utility vanished, she had nothing left for me but pure bitterness. A genuine parent loves their child even when the child says no. A parasite only values the host as long as it provides nourishment. When I cut off the financial supply, Brenda stopped pretending to be a mother. I saved the audio file to my secure drive. I kept it not as a source of pain, but as a permanent reminder of why I walked away on Thanksgiving night. Every time I felt a momentary twinge of societal guilt, I could play that recording and hear the true monster hiding behind her voice. Richard finished loading the truck and drove them away from the wealthy suburbs. They relocated to a cramped apartment complex sitting next to a noisy interstate highway. The hallway smelled of stale cigarette smoke. The rattling window air conditioning unit barely cooled the rooms. There was no marble foyer to host dinner parties and no manicured driveway to park luxury sedans. They were forced to inhabit the exact life they could actually afford using their own honest money. The financial bleeding was stopped. The winter turned into spring. A quiet peace settled over my apartment. I spent months rebuilding my own emotional foundation without the constant anxiety of their demands. I thought the physical distance and their total ruin meant the drama was concluded. I assumed they would quietly serve their legal punishments and fade into obscurity. But a major legal reckoning was still looming over my mother's head. The criminal courts were finalizing their trial schedule. The district attorney needed a star witness to secure the final conviction against the former charity director. The prosecutor called my phone on a Tuesday morning, bringing the battle out of the shadows and straight into a federal courtroom. My mother thought a cheap apartment was rock bottom, but a judge was about to show her the true meaning of consequences. The phone call from the federal prosecutor did not result in the theatrical courtroom showdown my mother anticipated. Brenda desperately wanted a public stage. She hoped to cry in front of a jury, play the exhausted matriarch, and blame her massive financial crimes on the heavy pressure of raising a family. The district attorney denied her that manipulative performance. The digital evidence was simply too overwhelming. The financial investigators possessed the frozen bank ledgers, the forged invoices, and the explicit text messages my sister surrendered during her plea deal. Faced with the absolute guarantee of a lengthy prison sentence in a federal facility, the public defender convinced my parents to accept a harsh plea agreement. The presiding judge handed down severe probation terms coupled with a mountain of mandatory financial restitution. They escaped a concrete cell, but the court sentenced them to a lifetime of grinding, inescapable debt. The wooden gavel slammed down against the sounding block, closing the legal chapter of my life forever. 365 days later, November returned to Arizona. The desert air cooled down, carrying the familiar crisp scent of autumn. The approach of the winter months used to fill my stomach with a heavy, sickening dread. For a decade, Thanksgiving meant draining my personal savings account to finance a fake display of wealth for ungrateful people. It meant bracing myself for subtle insults regarding my career, managing my parents' manufactured emergencies, and swallowing my pride to keep the peace. This year felt entirely different. I hosted dinner at my own house. The gathering was small, intimate, and deeply peaceful. Liam stood in my kitchen wearing a casual sweater, carving a modest turkey we roasted together. 3 of our closest friends sat around the dining room table, pouring wine and sharing genuine, joyful stories. The centerpieces were simple. There were no hidden cameras broadcasting our private moments to thousands of strangers on the internet. Nobody tapped a crystal glass with a silver spoon to announce the purchase of an expensive car using stolen funds. Most importantly, nobody slid an outrageous catering bill across the tablecloth, expecting me to quietly pay it while the rest of the room cheered. I sat in my chair and realized a profound shift in my daily existence. I had not checked my phone a single time the entire evening. I was no longer waiting for a frantic text message demanding a rapid cash transfer to stop an eviction. The constant vibrating anxiety that used to govern my nervous system was completely gone. The silence from my former relatives remained firmly intact. But information always manages to travel through the grapevine of extended family members. Aunt Diane called me a few days before the holiday to offer her warm wishes. She also provided a stark, unfiltered update on the surviving members of the Scottsdale illusion. Ashley no longer chased the glamorous life of a social media influencer. Her status symbol belonged to a corporate bank, and her designer wardrobe was sold online to cover her mounting legal fees. The golden child moved out of her expensive suburban townhouse. She now rented a tiny, cramped studio apartment situated behind a noisy retail plaza. Without my wallet to cushion her falls, she was forced to participate in the actual economy. Aunt Diane revealed that my younger sister woke up early every morning and took a public bus to a local dental clinic. She worked a standard 9-to-5 job as a front desk receptionist. The girl who used to complain about waking up before 10 in the morning now spent her days answering ringing phones, scheduling root canals, and verifying insurance claims for angry patients. She was earning a modest hourly wage and using those exact funds to pay her own utility bills. The toxic favoritism Brenda poured over her had been stripped away. Ashley was finally building actual character through the harsh reality of honest labor. She was learning the value of $1 because she actually had to earn one. My parents faced a much darker reality. Richard found his logistics career permanently destroyed. Corporate clients refused to sign freight contracts with a convicted fraudster. He struggled to find any legitimate employment for months. Eventually, the mounting pressure of the court-ordered restitution forced him to accept a grueling physical position. The former executive, who used to wear custom-tailored suits and brag about his golf handicap, now wore a bright yellow safety vest. He drove a delivery van for a local auto parts distributor, hauling heavy boxes across the city for minimum wage. But the ultimate dose of poetic justice landed squarely onto the shoulders of my mother. Brenda lost everything she valued. Her charity director position evaporated. Her wealthy country club peers banished her from their elite social circles. Her massive rented mansion was replaced by a dingy 2-bedroom apartment, reeking of stale smoke. However, the judge did not care about her bruised ego or her vanished social status. The court demanded a large percentage of her income every single month to repay the stolen donor funds. To satisfy the strict legal mandate, Brenda had to secure a steady paycheck. The woman who once stood in front of a mirror applying expensive makeup for high society galas was forced to fill out a standard employment application at a suburban shopping mall. A mid-tier department store hired her to work the grueling holiday shift. The irony was incredibly profound. I sat in my warm living room, surrounded by people who loved me for who I was, and thought about my mother's current situation. The exact woman who stood at the head of a Thanksgiving table 1 year ago, slapping my face hard enough to leave a red mark simply because I asked for a present, was now wearing a cheap polyester uniform. She wore a plastic name tag pinned to her chest. She spent 8 hours a day standing on her tired feet behind a retail cash register. Brenda was spending her entire holiday season scanning barcodes, folding clearance shirts, and bagging up gifts for complete strangers. She had to smile and offer polite greetings to rude customers. She watched happy families purchase presents for their daughters, knowing her own daughter would never speak to her again. The universe has a beautiful way of balancing the scales when you finally stop interfering with the natural consequences of bad behavior. I looked around my table and smiled. The food tasted better. The air felt lighter. I realized that the heavy guilt I carried for so many years was nothing more than the lingering ghost of old manipulations. Brenda trained me to feel selfish whenever I prioritized my own safety over her financial comfort. It took a physical strike and a mountain of legal documents to break that lifelong conditioning. Walking away did not make me a bad person. It made me a survivor. The dinner concluded with warm hugs and promises to meet again for Christmas. Liam and I washed the dishes together, enjoying the quiet, domestic rhythm of our shared life. I turned off the kitchen lights and went to sleep, feeling completely untethered from the past. I truly believed the story was finished. I thought the book was closed, the villains were punished, and the hero was allowed to rest in peace. However, the winter season always carries the potential for one last unexpected arrival. Life rarely wraps up loose ends without demanding a final signature. The next morning, the mail carrier dropped a thick, certified envelope into my locked mailbox. The return address printed on the corner did not belong to a bank, a prosecutor, or a charity board. The document waiting inside that sealed package was about to force me to make one final, unforgettable decision regarding the ashes of the family I left behind. I carried the heavy certified envelope back into my kitchen and set it on the granite counter. The crisp morning sunlight spilled through the window, illuminating the thick white paper. The return address printed in the upper corner belonged to the United States Bankruptcy Court for the District of Arizona. I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, picked up a steel letter opener, and sliced the sealed flap open. A thick stack of legal documents slid out onto the counter. I scanned the bold text at the top of the first page. Richard and Brenda had officially filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. The crushing weight of their legal fees, combined with the strict court-ordered restitution from the charity embezzlement, had finally broken them. They were attempting to liquidate their remaining personal assets to satisfy the endless line of creditors they had defrauded over the past 5 years. I flipped to the third page of the filing. The court required them to list every single individual and institution they owed money to. I ran my finger down the printed columns. There, buried between a high-interest private loan company and a discount furniture rental agency, was my name, Marina Smith. They listed me as an unsecured creditor for the exact amount of the catered Thanksgiving dinner, the wine, and the initial processing fees I paid to secure their fraudulent commercial bridge loan. The federal court was officially notifying me of my right to contest their bankruptcy. The letter included a blank petition form. If I signed the paper and mailed it back, I could drag my parents into a deposition. I could force them to sit across a mahogany table and answer humiliating financial questions under oath. I could fight for every single penny they took from me. I picked up a black ink pen. I held it over the signature line for a long time. I looked around my quiet, peaceful home. I listened to the soft hum of the refrigerator and the gentle chirping of the birds outside my window. I realized that fighting them for that money required my active participation in their misery. It required me to lower myself back into their toxic arena. It demanded my energy, my time, and my emotional bandwidth. I put the pen down. I picked up the stack of bankruptcy petitions, walked over to the paper shredder sitting beneath my home office desk, and fed the documents into the steel blades. The whirring sound of the machine chewing the heavy paper into tiny strips of confetti was the most satisfying noise I had heard in a year. The physical act of destroying that claim was my final declaration of independence. I forfeited the money because buying my permanent freedom was worth every single cent. I officially closed the door on Richard and Brenda, locking them outside in the harsh reality they built for themselves. People often ask me if I regret pressing that button on Thanksgiving Day. They watch the viral footage of the slap, they hear the story of the bank freeze, and they wonder if exposing my own family to the authorities was too harsh. Society trains us to protect our bloodlines at all costs. We are conditioned to believe that keeping a family secret is a noble act of loyalty. My answer to that question is always no. I do not carry a single ounce of regret. If I had stayed silent that afternoon, the outcome would have been catastrophic. Had I lowered my head, accepted the physical abuse, and paid that credit card bill, Brenda would have eventually bankrupted me. She would have drained the charity fund dry, and when the auditors inevitably caught her, she would have pointed the finger at my signature on the guarantor forms. She would have dragged my spotless corporate career into a federal indictment just to save her own skin. If I had protected my sister, Ashley would have never learned the basic concept of independence. She would be 35 years old, still living in a fake suburban reality, waiting for someone else to fund her next luxury vacation. She would have remained a permanent child, trapped in a cycle of entitlement and delusion. If I had shielded my father, Richard would have kept enabling the abuse. He would have continued borrowing money from dangerous private lenders, using his wife and his daughters as human shields to avoid facing his own failures. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for toxic people is to cut off their funding. Funding their denial only prolongs their illness. Shielding them from the consequences of their actions prevents them from hitting the ground. Hitting the hard, unforgiving pavement of reality is often the only experience that teaches a person how to stand up on their own 2 feet. I did not ruin my family. I simply stopped paying the expensive subscription fee required to maintain their illusion. I lost a family, but I gained my life. For decades, I operated under a false definition of love. I believed that being a good daughter meant being endlessly useful. I assumed that if I solved enough problems, paid enough bills, and absorbed enough insults, they would eventually respect me. I was wrong. When you allow people to treat you like a utility, they will never view you as a human being. I am no longer an emergency fund. I am no longer a silent cosigner. I am no longer a punching bag. I learned that true family does not require you to shrink so they can look bigger. A genuine parent does not demand your financial stability as tribute for raising you. Love is not a transaction, and gratitude is not a permanent debt. Generosity without boundaries is not love at all. It is captivity. When you give without limits to people who take without conscience, you are only funding your own destruction. By letting their fake empire collapse, I cleared the ground to build a real foundation for myself. My life is now filled with transparent relationships, honest budgets, and quiet evenings. I am marrying a man who inspects the strength of a structure before he trusts it, and together we are building a home that no lie can ever penetrate. The slap across my face on Thanksgiving Day stung for 24 hours. The red mark faded, and the physical pain disappeared by the next morning. But the unyielding freedom that strike provoked will last the rest of my life. The sharp sting of betrayal was the exact medicine I needed to wake up. I am Marina Smith. I am a senior risk analyst. I am a woman who protects her peace. And for the first time in 33 years, I am finally free. Thank you for listening to my story here on Grape Vengeance. If this journey resonated with you, Remember that walking away from a burning building does not make you the villain. It makes you a survivor. Keep your boundaries firm, protect your peace, and never let anyone use your loyalty as a weapon against you.